Hi everyone, Janie here with Dig, Plant, Water, Repeat. Welcome back to my garden and welcome to the next installment in my video series, Building the Foundation of a Successful Garden, that I am doing with proven winners. So this series for 5 months, November through March, we are going through month by month and focusing on different aspects of the foundation of our gardens. So come spring, when we start purchasing all these beautiful, lovely plants, they are ready to go in our gardens and we understand the concepts that we need to have a successful garden. This month, January, we are moving right along and we are discussing light and why light is very important for us gardeners. Light, along with water and soil, is one of the main components a plant needs to thrive. Plants take light from the sun and convert it into energy for food for itself. This is a process known as photosynthesis. I'm sure we've all heard of this in elementary school. The tricky thing is some plants need more light than others. Some plants can handle all day hot burning sun and be as happy as can be, and other plants maybe only need dapple light or mostly shade to thrive. The goal for us as gardeners is to find the optimal amount of light in our garden for each particular plant so that it can flourish and thrive. So let's get into it. Let's talk about 5 tips every gardener should know about light in the garden to optimize your success. Tip number 1 is knowing your terms. You'll notice on a plant tag, the grower has labeled the plant with a certain light term, whether it is full sun, part shade, full shade, or even indirect light. These terms are the grower's way to guide us to put that plant in the optimal position in our garden for it to thrive. And knowing the definition, the horticulture definition of these terms is important so that we can speak the same language as the growers. Full sun is pretty straightforward and pretty self-explanatory. These plants like light and they like lots of it. Technically, full sun is 8 or more hours of sun during the day. Now, contrast that with a little bit more confusing terms, and those are part sun and part shade. A lot of people will actually lump these two terms together and say that they're the same thing, but actually these two terms have very distinguishable characteristics that we need to know about. Part sun means 4 to 6 hours of sunlight per day. Part shade means 2 to 4 hours of sunlight per day. But there is a difference in the type of sunlight that part sun and part shade are talking about. Part sun can handle 4 to 6 hours of any type of light during the day. That would be morning sun or afternoon sun. Part shade plants, however, are a little bit more delicate. They can't handle as much sun. They like 2 to 4 hours of morning sun only. So morning sun is a lot more gentle and a lot more soft than the hot afternoon sun. So whenever I see a plant that says part shade, I know that it likes sunlight, but it likes gentle sunlight. Now, full shade is a little misleading in my opinion. If I see a plant tag that says full shade, my automatic inclination would be that this plant can't handle any sunlight at all. And that's actually not the case. Full shade plants can handle 2 hours or less of soft, gentle morning sun. And there are actually some full shade plants that would love you and thrive if you gave them about 2 hours of gentle morning sun each day. And then finally, you might see a plant that's labeled as bright indirect light. Often houseplants are labeled this way, but there are some very, very shade-loving plants that you can put in your garden that like bright indirect light. These plants are the plants that need no direct sunlight at all. So imagine if you have a window and the sun is beaming in through the window onto a table. These plants would like the area right next to those sun rays, not in those sun rays, right next to it. So it's never actually getting the sun rays on its leaves, but it's close enough that it's going to absorb some light. All right, now that we understand any term that you might see on a plant tag, here's something to consider that you're not going to see on a plant tag. And that is tip number 2, which is consider light intensity. An often ignored but extremely important concept that we as gardeners need to remember is the light intensity of our particular region. So take, for example, a gardener that lives in Phoenix, Arizona, the middle of a desert, and compare that with maybe a gardener that lives in upstate New York. You take a plant and you put that plant in full sun, 8 or more hours of sun in both regions. Both are technically in full sun, right? If we follow the horticultural terms. But logically, we all know that 8 hours of sun in Phoenix, Arizona is very different than 8 hours of sun in Buffalo, New York. And it's really hard for growers to indicate this on plant tags. So it's up to us as gardeners to understand the differences between the sun intensity in our particular region. Another way to think about light intensity is the varying amount of intensity as the day progresses. Again, morning sun is going to be soft and gentle to your plants, and then the mid to late afternoon sun is going to be very intense and much hotter. So you could take a plant and you could put it in 8 hours of morning sun or 8 hours of hot afternoon sun, and it's going to be a little bit different. That plant is going to take in a different intensity of light, depending on whether it's morning sun or afternoon sun. So when choosing locations for plants in your garden, it's important to determine which type of sun and the intensity of sun the plant is going to get in that spot in your garden. Where I live in California, the sun's light intensity is very, very strong. In the dog days of summer, if I go out in the mid to late afternoon, I can almost feel my skin burning. It's so hot and it's so intense. So I have to take this light intensity into consideration when I choose my plants and when I choose the location for my plants. There are a couple things that I can do to kind of work around this light intensity. One of them is I can err on the low side of a range. So for instance, if a part sun plant needs 4 to 6 hours of sun, maybe I'll give it 4 hours of sun instead of 6. Or maybe if it's a full sun plant that needs 8 hours of sun, maybe I'll do just 8 or maybe 7. The other thing that I often do is I often protect my plants from the hot afternoon sun. And I do this by either planting them on the east side of a wall, so it's only getting the morning sun, or maybe a barrier, or maybe another plant or shrub, just to protect it from that intense summer sun. Compare this to someone who lives in an area that doesn't have the same light intensity that I do. Maybe someone who lives in the Pacific Northwest. These gardeners need to search for the sun. They need to get as much sun as possible for their plants, because not only is the sun's intensity weaker there, but it's also often covered with cloud cover. So these gardeners need as much sun as possible for their plants. So what they can do, if they have a range, part sun 4 to 6 hours, maybe they want to err on the side of 6 hours. So again, it's just kind of thinking about your region, thinking about your sun intensity, and planting in certain locations accordingly. Tip number 3 is choosing your plants wisely. It's time to go plant shopping. But before you get in the car and head to the plant store, I want you to think about the area that you're planning to buy for. Is it full sun? Is it hot afternoon sun? Is it gentle morning sun? Think about it before you go to the plant store so that when you get there, you can check the plant tags, see what light levels the growers have labeled those plants as, and purchase accordingly. If you're going to purchase online, like on the Proven Winners website, you can actually filter out by light level and make it really easy for you. Now, you've picked out your plant, you've bought it, taken it home, and planted it in the ground, but your job as a gardener is not done. Tip number 4 is assess for signs of light problems. And this is something that you need to do regularly. Just like you need to assess for signs of water problems, you need to assess for signs of light problems. It's important to check your plant to watch for signs of either too much sunlight or too little sunlight. Signs that it's too much sunlight might be burning or scorching on the edge of leaves. So if you see kind of brown edges that are crispy and almost look like someone's taken a lighter to them, that might be a sign that that plant is getting just a little too much light, or maybe a lot too much light. Another sign of too much light is if the blooms start bleaching out. So I love Supertunia Blue Skies. It's one of my favorite Supertunias, but where I live, because I have such intense light, I can't put that plant in too much sunlight or the blooms will bleach out and it just won't be as pretty as I want it to be. The more shade I put it in to a certain level, the more beautiful the blooms are and the characteristics of this gorgeous blue flowers really come out. So I know I can't put that plant in 8 hours of sun. I've got to put it in 6 or less hours of sun because I'm taking my sun intensity into consideration. Okay, my last tip number 5 that I have for all of you is that it is okay to adjust as needed. If you notice a plant has a light issue, it is okay to move that plant from one location to another to either give it more light or to give it less light. Plants are pretty resilient and they actually might appreciate the move and start performing a lot better for you. Another way to adjust light for a certain plant is to adjust structures that are around that plant. Can you limb up the lower limbs of a nearby tree to allow more sunlight through? Can you put up a lattice partition to give some dappled light, or even put up a beautiful tutor that might block it from the hot afternoon sun? My favorite way to garden, and I feel like the only way I could garden, is trial and error. It doesn't mean I'm failing. It just means I tried something and it didn't work out. So if I notice a problem, I will just move the plant or move a structure. I'll adjust accordingly. Okay, so that is it for my 5 tips for light levels for your garden. Make sure you check out my playlist, my Building the Foundations of a Successful Garden playlist. I will link it in the description down below. I already have a soil video and a water video, and I have 2 more videos coming up in February and March, so stay tuned for that. So I hope this video helped clear up any confusion any of you had about light definitions or labels, or maybe even issues with light intensity in your garden. But I do want to leave you with one final consideration, and that is, as gardeners, we can try to categorize and label every single thing in our garden and in gardening in general. But we have to remember we are not in charge, Mother Nature is. So even if a label says full sun, Mother Nature might have a different idea for that plant in that particular garden in that particular spot. And the secret sauce for having a successful garden is having the ability to listen to Mother Nature, to assess the plant, to look at it, to see if there's any issues going on, and to act accordingly. So it's important to remember we can do our best as gardeners and try and learn as much as possible, but Mother Nature, she's the boss. I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you all have a chance to get in your garden today.